Chapter 6. Monday, 4 p.m. The box. It was definitely something to think about. I smiled my sneer to show that I wasn't the kind of guy who was intimidated by an overweight, 5'0" block of walking granite. But the sneer formed slowly and hit his backside. Leaving the door open, he barked orders as he lumbered to the street. Cops began getting into patrol cars, turning off their lights and driving away. He meant what he said. That scared me, because I knew what I'd do in his shoes, how far I'd go, and the rules I'd break. I suppressed a shudder and looked away from Larry and Riley. Tom had left about 1 million gallons of DNA from floor to ceiling in Kaufman's bedroom. 20 minutes later, Larry and I loaded my tower computer, keyboard, and display, all wrapped in bedding, into the back of the Suburban. I carried the tower computer. If Larry dropped the graphics display, I could replace it for half the cost. The hand-built, gaming-sized tower was another matter entirely. My laptop, which I always kept hidden in my bedroom, easily fit into the same duffel bag I used when I moved into this neighborhood. The box didn't leave. He sat in his car across the street, parked behind a patrol car with 2 officers inside. Both cars were running. Why stand out in the heat when you can sit in air conditioning? I nodded to the cars and said to Larry, "So he's not leaving you on your own?" He frowned across the street and replied, "He leaves, something happens, and then he has a problem. Besides, he's probably waiting for us to leave and for the warrant." "The warrant?" "Yeah, to look around inside your place," Larry replied a little too casually, making me angry. "What was her name?" I asked. "Who? The girl Diana was talking about? The one your witness murdered?" Anger flared in his face as he turned to look across the street into Diana's eyes. After a long moment, Larry looked back at me, the anger fading to thoughtfulness, then regret. "Her name was Helen Thompson, and to answer your next question, the DA was a chicken shit who was afraid to lose a case. Diana never got that. I was just doing my damn job." I looked at Diana, who shifted his stare to me, his face unreadable. I told myself he was nothing more than a fat, bitter man with a lousy attitude. Making me a victim wouldn't bring back Helen Thompson or give her justice. There was nothing in my house for him to find except my DNA. I sighed. After that, the next step would be his murder crime scene. There he would discover a strand of my hair or a fiber he got from my couch. I turned away from his beady little eyes to Larry. "So, now this guy takes it out on me while I'm waiting for Gibaldi to have the balls to charge Nikki and Dragna? You have to be fucking shitting me." Larry shook his head and muttered something about trying to see what he could do. I shrugged. There was sure in hell nothing I could do about it. I reached into my duffel bag and pulled out a large envelope. Ignoring Larry's protests, I walked to my neighbor's house. One of the older boys answered the door. "Mr. Lerner?" Martin Garcia looked nervously at Larry and Riley, who were scowling at me as they stood by their black SUV with tinted windows. He had been reading the streets since he was 5, and probably made them before they got out of their vehicle. "Look, I have to leave. Give your mom these keys. These are for the van, and those are for the vending machine supplies in a storage unit. Everything she needs is in this envelope. She's done this before, so she knows what to do. It's all hers, okay?" He looked up at me and nodded. "And tell Al goodbye for me." He solemnly nodded again and said, "Okay." As I turned, he said softly, "Mr. Lerner, you cool?" Looking over my shoulder, I said, "Yeah, Martin, I'm good. Thanks. Oh, tell Chuck I said to keep taking videos. Maybe one will go viral someday." "Okay," he replied, and shut the door. I heard the locks click into place. Martin Garcia was an honor student, a star athlete, and there was a good chance he'd end up in a cheap coffin instead of a dorm room. Anger and betrayal had brought me to this valley of the damned. But unlike Martin and his mother Paula, I had lived a life free of fear and with a future. Then I met Gabriella and learned about love. For a while, I was alive. I hope the kid survived, got out of this neighborhood, and stayed out. He deserved the chance to discover life. Riley motioned for me to hurry up. First, they sat around drinking my best craft beer, and now we had to boogie. I went back inside my house to piss her off and to empty my bladder. "Where are we going?" I asked as I climbed into the back. The SUV was damn near as big as the place I was leaving. It had soft leather seats and better air conditioning. Larry looked at me in the rearview mirror and said, "Heading west. That's all we know. Sit back and relax." "We're driving there?" I asked. "They said to head west on I-70 and they'd call." "Yeah, we pretty much always drive anymore. The price of airline tickets never comes down, and there are damn few flights. So take it easy." His worried eyes in the mirror belied the bluff marshal-to-witness tone. He knew the problem. Sleep came hard for me, and nightmares often left me exhausted. My self-prescribed course of treatment was to wear myself out. Instead of sleeping at night, I refilled my vending machines, and then worked at my computer until it was time for my pre-dawn shift of hard labor on the golf course. On the good days, I came home, showered, and with the help of beer, fell asleep until it was time to feed my vending machines again. My customers all agreed that my junk food dispensers were the best stocked in town. The key was to stay busy until exhaustion took over. The alternative was to battle the darkness to exhaustion. I was winning the battles in a war I was fated to lose, and losing was something I had looked forward to for what seemed like a long time. I would have been fine if I were the one driving. Larry knew that, but explaining it to Riley wasn't an option. I needed to gut it out and think about something until, hopefully, the drive lulled me to sleep. I picked Detective Dayana to think about, since he had never figured into my fate. Regarding getting nabbed by Dayana, it might take weeks or even months for him to get his evidence in order. Years of resentment made him overplay his hand in front of the marshals. If his district attorney required a more plausible motive than the fact that I was a scumbag WITSEC witness, or even dragged his feet, Dayana would have wasted his time. In the end, I thought about what I always thought about: Nicky. Finding him was almost impossible. My plan to bring him to me was a long shot at best. Either way, it was much more likely he'd get me. The man was a government-trained killer. I woke from a rare, deep sleep with no dreams or nightmares to find the late summer sun low in the sky, with St. Louis far behind us. Larry still drove. Riley twisted around to look back at me, pulling her legs up, leaning back on the door, and tucking the chest strap of the seatbelt under her arm. My left hand reached for the driver's door locks like it always did when Gabriella pulled that trick. She always ignored me when I told her seatbelts are not designed for that position, and that it's easy to bump the door handle. Gabriella tumbling out the passenger door was one of my reoccurring nightmares. Sadly, it was not the worst. Riley cocked her head and looked at me. I pulled my hand from the door handle, struggling to get my mind back into the now. She gave me a half smile. "Where are we going?" I asked. She shook her head and said, "Still don't know. Still waiting for the call to be made. But it looks like I still have a job for now." "Congratulations. Why would they fire someone who can bring the dead back to life?" Larry snorted. My head began to clear, and I asked, "Okay, we're headed west. Which is it, Denver or Dallas?" "They call it the WITSEC Bermuda Triangle. St. Louis, Denver, and Dallas. Some say it was a reaction to Black Monday in 1987 when the stock market crashed, and the government decided it needed to take the rhetoric of smaller government seriously. I'd also heard the flip side. The WITSEC Bermuda Triangle was the Marshals' version of empire building. Within a decade, the program's witnesses who could be moved without huge expense or risk were quietly split between these cities. Risk was defined as not making a public fuss. After that, the Marshal Service divided almost all witnesses between the offices in those cities. It was an unsung success from the standpoint of cost and efficiency, and no one was wiser except the marshals, their witnesses, and organized crime. Everyone agreed that Denver was the best place, whether it was a job posting, a new life, or a new hunting ground. Better schools, less crime, and the mountains had universal appeal. Larry replied, "Dale, give it a rest." "My feelings hurt," I replied. "Larry, my face might be on about 1,000 cell phones right now. You can at least tell me where the hell we might be going. Let's just hope they got your good side. Besides, we don't know yet. Waiting for the call. I have a feeling you haven't been on a road trip in a long time. Enjoy the scenery," Larry said with a grin. Riley, lost in thought, gazed out at the highway, probably wondering what her job might be if she kept it. Larry kept his eyes guarded when he checked the rearview mirror. I lolled back in the leather seat, watching the farmland and rolling hills slide past. The sun dropped below low, dark clouds that flashed briefly with lightning. I felt tense and tried to remember the last time I took a road trip to take my mind off it. It didn't work. When I realized that my hands were in fists, it got worse. My native state had not included sitting with nothing to do for a long time. When the call came, Riley mostly listened, with a lot of yes sirs and a few no sirs sprinkled with maybes. Occasionally, she glanced back at me for inspiration, clearly struggling to provide answers I was allowed to hear. Focusing on her helped, and I managed to unclench my hands. She stopped looking back at me when I crossed my eyes. Mostly her attention wandered, and I knew she was on a conference call where most of the words huddled together at the other end. It went on a long time for something as simple as where to stash me next. Finally, she said, "Yes, sir, I can do that." Carelessly tossing her cell phone on the dash, she turned to Larry, pointedly ignored me, and said, "Denver. And yeah, the video appears to be going viral. It shows me and both sides of Lerner. How in the hell did those morons do it so fast? Our IT geeks say they can keep it off the news and social media. For a while. Big deal." I tried to hide my smile. Chuck finally had a video go viral. Good for him. And Denver was as good of a place as Dallas to try to get Nicky to come to me when he saw the video. Sooner or later, someone would make sure he saw it, and I needed it to be a lot sooner than later. On the other hand, it showed the dark side of Riley when things didn't go her way. I wasn't the one who aimed a weapon at a young man just trying to build a following on social media. Or maybe this was how she was when she couldn't ditch me and talk behind my back. I considered pointing out that gangbangers and their crowd were insane social network users. One of my old company's most lucrative services was deep background checks on suspects and their known associates. Given the time they spent online, we often wondered where they found time to sell drugs, steal cars, or do much of anything in the way of crime. I said, "I like Denver. Used to drive down there all the time." "Where in Denver?" "You're going to be staying in a very nice place, from what I understand anyway. It's on the south side of the city, and you won't be moving. This time, you stick in place. Larry and I will be making sure you do." Larry asked, "Where?" "Cottonwood or something like that. They're sending the details," Riley replied. Taking his eyes off the road, he exclaimed, "What? No way!" Riley snapped harshly. "Larry, the road!" She was too hard on him. He barely swerved, and the Audi TT driver had overreacted by veering sharply to the edge of the outside lane. The Audi got even by cutting in front of us and forcing Larry to hit the brakes. Then, having proved who was the better man, the TT kicked in the afterburners. When the hand came out of the driver's window, it was too far away to see the middle finger. When Larry hit the accelerator, he and I thought he accepted the challenge. Then he remembered the conversation and put us back on cruise control. He asked in a "please God, let it be true" voice, "Tell me it's the place the Bureau was using on that sting." "Yeah, I think so, unless there's another," Riley said. Larry looked at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes crinkling, and said, "We're going to love this place. I have a buddy who worked on that operation." "We?" I replied. "You heard her, brother. How can we keep you there if you don't stay there? Right, Riley?" She muttered to her window. Maybe. Larry laughed. "From what Ben told me, we can each have an entire floor. The master bath is probably 3 times as big as the dump you were living in, Dale. It even has a refrigerator," he said, leaving no doubt what room he was taking. "Great. Sounds like I'll fit right in," I said. Riley mumbled, "Not me. The pictures also show me." Larry said, "Cool it, Dale. Riley, you can color your hair. Guys, get with the program. It doesn't get better than this." Staring out her window, Riley said, "Larry, this isn't a vacation. It's our job." Larry sighed. "Fine. Have it your way. Just my luck to get teamed up with you two. Say what you want about the Bureau, but those guys know how to live. And Ben tells stories about times in that house you can't believe. Besides, we need a cover, and having a woman in the mix is better." Riley turned her face to him and smiled evilly. "Not anymore, cowboy. You and Dale can be the couple. And Larry, in case you forgot, we don't team up with witnesses. We keep them in line," I added. And alive. Oops, my bad. Not always. Oh well, the government. You get what you pay for." She didn't bother to reply. With the muscles in his jaw twitching, Larry kept his eyes on the road. Riley resumed her Gabriella position, tucked the seatbelt under her arm, and stared at me, probably wondering if she could waterboard me in the backseat of a moving vehicle with one bottle of sparkling water. I readied myself. Where was I last night? "None of your damn business, deputy. Sorry your systems are getting hacked." "Wait, I'm not. I'm no longer in that business, so I don't give a fuck. And I never heard of the guy who got murdered. Keeping him alive is your business, isn't it?" I would pound that home. Riley sighed and said, "Lerner, we need to finish the little conversation we were having in your kitchen." Since she eased into the question, I eased into my answer. "What the hell do you want me to tell you?" "Just this. Given what's happened, don't you think it's time you tell us why Dragna had Nikki kill your wife and try to kill you? You recognized them in the restaurant, right? How did you know Dragna? Dale, don't you owe it to Gabriella to finally tell us the truth? Or was she in on it?" Larry barked. "God damn it, Riley, that's out of line." "The hell it is, Larry, and don't interrupt me when I'm talking to a suspect," she snarled back, keeping her dark eyes on mine. "Don't you mean a witness?" he growled. She ignored him as I gaped at her, floundering as the accusations about Gabriella were uttered by a woman with the same dark eyes, sitting in a car like my wife used to do. Already struggling, it blindsided me, destroying all my defenses against the darkness. My hands reclenched, the nails of my fingers digging into my palms. Looking down, I saw small rivulets of blood running from my hands. I heard my teeth grind together. Riley's eyes widened. "Are you okay, Dale?" "Larry, what the hell's happening?" she asked. Larry barked. "Dale, look at me. Come on, man. Look at me." Larry's eyes pulled at me in the rearview mirror, darting away for brief moments to look back at the road before returning. Anybody can signal with their face. Larry sends complete messages with those light blue eyes. I turned my head to look out at the thunderheads forming on the western skyline. I remembered the first time I received one of those messages. I had just awakened.